Hello everyone. Myself Dr. Chandrakali Dotto, Assistant Professor of Sociology of Hiralal Mazumdar Memorial College for Women. Today is 3rd December, International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We also remember this day as World Disability Day. We organize programs, seminars. But do we really know the significance of this day? Do we really know what disability is? Disability is not a new term. Though there have been changes in using this particular phrase in due course of time, but in the present day globalized and networked societies, this term has entered almost all possible discourses, be it the academic, administrative, legal, or anything else. As per the definition provided by World Health Organization, disabilities is an umbrella term covering impairments, activity limitations, and participation restrictions. It results from the interaction between individuals with a health condition such as cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, vision impairment, and depression, as well as personal and environmental factors including negative attitudes, inaccessible transportation and public buildings, and limited social support. The experiences of persons with disabilities are multifarious. While on the one hand they struggle every day with their impairments, on the other they have access to poorer health services, inadequate education, and job opportunities. Though in recent years lots have been done, which undoubtedly reflect progress, but there is still more to do. Developed societies of the world have prioritized the requirements of the disabled people and also have made every attempt to the construction of disability friendly education, health systems, as well as work organizations. In the year 1992, the annual observance of the International Day of Disabled Persons was proclaimed. It was there in United Nations General Assembly Resolution 47/3. The observation of the day aims to promote an understanding of disability issues and mobilize support for the dignity, rights, and well-being of persons with disabilities. The 21st century has witnessed substantial amount of research on disability and disabled people. Scholars have taken up issues like socio-cultural determinants and consequences of disability, the social treatment of the disabled people, the stigma associated with it, problem of discrimination faced by the disabled people and their family, unequal opportunities, and less accessibility of inclusive education system, as well as work organizations, etc., and so on. Burgeoning research on education for the disabled or differently abled has received worldwide attention, especially after the introduction of the inclusive education system, which was adopted at the World Conference on Special Needs Education, Access and Quality in Spain 1994. It was also known as Salamanca Statement, which was further restated at World Education Forum. The statement solicits governments to give the highest priority to making education systems inclusive and adopt the principle of inclusive education as a matter of policy. The idea of inclusion is further supported by the United Nations Standard Rules on Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disability, proclaiming participation and equality for all. Inclusive education is defined as a process of addressing the diverse needs of all learners by reducing barriers to and within the learning environment. It means attending the age-appropriate class of the child's local school with individually tailored support. Like other countries, India has also taken initiatives to provide an inclusive environment for the disabled people. India is a signatory to the Declaration on the full participation and equality of people with disabilities in the Asia Pacific region. India has ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is also a signatory to the Bivako Millennium Framework for Action towards an Inclusive, Barrier Free, and Rights Based Society. The Bivako Plus 5 further efforts towards an inclusive, barrier free, and right based society for persons with disabilities in Asia and the Pacific added the emphasis. The Incheon strategy to make the right real for persons with disabilities in Asia and the Pacific provides the Asian and Pacific region and the world with the first set of regionally agreed disability inclusive development goals. The Incheon strategy will enable to track progress towards improving the quality of life and the fulfillment of the rights of the region's persons with disability. The Sustainable Development Goals pledges for leaving no one behind. Recognizing that the dignity of the human being is fundamental, the SDGs wish to see the goals and targets met for all nations and peoples and for all segments of society, and to endeavor to reach the farthest behind first. As per the Government of India Census 2011 report, India was witness to a population of 121 crores, of which 2.68 crores are disabled. That amounts to 2.21%. It has been pointed out that in an era where the need for developing an inclusive and conducive environment for the disabled people is essential, the primary onus should be on educating and sensitizing the masses about this, as well as take every possible initiatives and measures to comply with the goals of sustainability and welfare of those people. Now, with reference to Indian legal provisions as well as education policies, inclusion of disabled people in education system was considered way back in 1966. Thereafter, several policies have emphasized the need for developing special schools to look after the specific requirements of these children with special needs. The National Education Commission had acknowledged that regular schools and classrooms are primarily designed for average learners and thus are not well equipped to fulfill the needs of the disabled children. Therefore, the establishment of special schools was felt necessary. But in 2016, when the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act came up, inclusive education became a statutory guarantee. Furthermore, it is also important for the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009 to be cognizant of these developments in frameworks for inclusive education and provide for necessary amendments. It is felt by the academicians, bureaucrats, government officials, and lawmakers that development of an inclusive education system at all levels, be it pre-primary, primary, secondary, and higher studies, is the most essential requirement. And we all are also aware of the National Education Policy 2020, which was introduced in 2020 during the challenging time of COVID-19 pandemic. It also emphasizes the inclusive and equitable education for all and has given adequate attention to special education and educators. In India, there are separate laws or acts to deal with disability and disabled people. The first law is the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. The National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999, and also Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 was enacted on 28 December 2016, which came into force from 19 April 2017. The salient features of the Act are Responsibility has been cast upon the appropriate governments to take effective measures to ensure that the persons with disabilities enjoy their rights equally with others. Secondly, disability has been defined based on an evolving and dynamic concept. And thirdly, the Act covers following specified disabilities: physical disability, among which there is locomotor disability, leprosy-cured person, cerebral palsy, dwarfism, muscular dystrophy, acid attack victims. Then there is visual impairment, blindness, low vision. There is hearing impairment, deaf, hard of hearing, speech and language disability. There is also intellectual disability, among which we find specific learning disabilities and autism spectrum disorder. There is mental behavior or mental illness. And there is also disability caused due to chronic neurological conditions such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, blood disorder like hemophilia, thalassemia, sickle cell disease, and also there is another category called multiple disabilities. Additional benefits have been provided for persons with benchmark disabilities and those with high support needs. It has been said that every child with benchmark disability between the age group of 6 and 18 years shall have the right to free education. 5% reservation in seats in government and government aided higher educational institutions for persons with benchmark disabilities. Stress has also been given to ensure accessibility in public buildings, both government and private, in a prescribed time frame. 4% reservation is there in government jobs for certain persons or class of persons with benchmark disability. Also, the Act provides for grant of guardianship by district court or any authority designated by the state government, under which there will be joint decision between the guardian and the persons with disabilities. There is broad-based central and state advisory boards on disability to be set up as policy-making bodies. The Act provides for strengthening of the Office of Chief Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities and State Commissioners of Disabilities, which will act as regulatory bodies and grievance redressal agencies and also monitor implementation of the Act. These offices will be assisted by an advisory committee comprising of experts in various disabilities. There is provision for creation of national and state fund to provide financial support to the persons with disabilities. The Act provides for penalties for offences committed against persons with disabilities. And also there is designated special courts to handle cases concerning violation of rights of PWDs or person with disabilities. But even when all policies are made, they remain in paper only. Unfortunately, we are still far away from attaining these desired goals. We think, we empathize, and finally we formulate laws. But when it comes to the implementation and monitoring, unfortunately, our dynamism is lost. There is lack of zeal and willingness, and most importantly, there is acute dearth of research and sensitization on the actual preparedness. That is one of the prerequisites of developing and providing an inclusive system in true sense. And it is here that we should start afresh. We have to motivate ourselves and others surrounding us to be a little more sensible, responsible, and empathetic so that our future world is a much better place to live in. And so, I'd like to end here by a poem by Olvutawi B. Omotayo, Disabled. Never call a blind man disabled. Never tag disability to a lame man. A deaf man shouldn't be given the title disabled person. Who is then a disabled person? The one who sees but couldn't render help is disabled. The one who has mouth but doesn't speak good is disabled. The one who has ears but doesn't hear the truth is disabled. Those people up there are the disabled people. Those who sat on our reaches as on a wheelchair, those who saw our spoiled roads but turned a blind eyes, those who heard our cry but turned a deaf ear, those who have hands but can't render help, those are the real disabled people. Thank you.
Send button. Hello, I am Shayantan Ghosh, Assistant Professor in the Department of Sociology, Hiralal Mazumdar Memorial College for Women, Dakshineshwar, Kolkata. Just think, my friend, what consists the very basic of education. Yes, you have guessed it right. The 3 R's, as we often talk about, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, how do you do that? Generally, by seeing, that is to say, to your eyes, right? Now, just imagine people who don't have eyes or who can't see. How do they, that is to say, how do people like us do these? We generally use other senses. We listen, we memorize, and try to remember the text that is given to us. Or we use our sense of touch, that is, we read and write through braille. Do you know when the pandemic broke, how many persons with disability suffered in case of education? Because students with disability need one-to-one attention in physical classrooms. Yes, all of us would agree, perhaps, particularly in India, students need much more one-to-one attention in physical classrooms. This is important for all, but for persons with disability, this is indispensable. It did affect their results as their marks have gone down during the pandemic years. Even in the premier institutes who have a special school or who which schools are famous for blind for education. How do you explain an arithmetic or any maths, any sum in an online mode to persons who can't see? They need to feel, they need to listen, they need to, and that through these they will get to know. So senses are gateway to knowledge. It's not only about seeing, but also the fact that we listen, we taste, we touch, we smell, and we see, if we see, and through these we know, right? The voice, yes, I'm talking about the mechanical voice, which you just heard at the beginning of my lecture, is of a TTS, that is text to speech software. We all, we most of us have smartphones. Any person who has a smartphone has a TTS pre-installed, be it in Android, in iPhones, and so on. But for the quote unquote normal persons, they do not turn it on. If they do, or if they just do it by accident, they find it very difficult to handle their phone. But for the blind persons, it is the way. So there are multiple ways to reach a certain goal, right? We use text to speech softwares in phones, computers, and so on. There are other softwares which are speech to text. Say, I will say something and the software will listen and type it. Although the accuracy is not unquestionable, and there are a lot of work which are to be done in these areas. Still, technological advancements are trying to make disabled persons able so that persons with disability can be included in society. What are the other ways? We can use braille books, audiobooks, and so on. We talk about inclusive education, right? But how do an educational institution gets inclusive, which can include all? The word all is very complicated because I and approximately 1 billion, that is 100 crore people around the world are disabled. Each of them, or rather each of us, is disabled in our own way. You cannot put people, or you should not put people within brackets like VIs, visually impaired, HIs, hearing impairment, locomotive disability, LD, and so on and so forth. As each person does things in her or his own way, each person is quote unquote normal in her or his own way. Similarly, each person with disability is disabled in his or her own way. So, in order to become inclusive, society, state need to get inclusive. For educational institutions, we must include braille books in all subjects, and each book which has a written version for normal students must have a braille version. I know it's a huge project, it's costly, but we have to do it. Each book must have an audio version, that is audiobook, because all visually impaired persons are not able to read and write through braille, because some visually impaired persons are blind by birth, but others have become blind at a later age of their life. So they don't know braille. They might not know braille. So how are they going to read, write, and do arithmetic? For them, for all of them, we have to think, right? In addition to that, we can think each and every way where the other senses can be used, like sound, smell, touch, taste, and so on. For example, floor engraving may be one way. Say, if I enter into an educational institution, I want to go to the principal's room, there should be one kind of floor enhancement, maybe the shape of a square. If I want to go to the washroom, there should be another kind of floor enhancement, maybe in the shape of a triangle. If I want to go to the library, there can be another way of floor enhancement, maybe in the shape of a rectangle, and so on. There could be audio guidance. We could design an app for each educational institution so that the internal navigation gets uh, uh, more inclusive for visually impaired persons. Just like we have other maps in the road outside the education institutions, we can reach following that map like Google Map, right, from one place to another. We can map our own education institutions and make it inclusive through text to speech softwares. We can include different engravings in walls for different departments. There could be sound systems installed in each department. So, and it should include sensors. So, if I go close, it will say Department of Sociology, Department of Physics, Principal's Room, Library, like that, so that I get to know where I am and whether to choose that or move to the next room. In case of elevators, we can have both braille and uh, text to speech softwares or sound systems which will make disabled abled or help them in or enable them to use the elevator. Ramps are not optional but indispensable for persons who have locomotive disability. It is not only about the ramp but also about the classroom which should be inclusive for wheelchairs. Along with that, we can think about the TLMs, that is teaching learning materials, which should be inclusive for persons with disability. The chalk and talk method, if you write something in the blackboard, I won't be able to see. So how do I get to know? I want knowledge. And I think all of us know that knowledge is power. So these are some of the ways through which we can make our own educational institutions inclusive for persons with disability. Here I have mainly talked about persons with visual impairment. I think we have a responsibility to include our fellow citizens, our friends, so that we can march forward in the journey of life together. And also we can learn from them as well. It's not at all and one-way traffic. Persons who are very famous, persons with disabilities, some of them are very famous, and we are still learning from all of them. We're learning, and we will learn from them. You talk about Homer, writer of Iliad and Odyssey, the composer of Iliad and Odyssey. You talk about Beethoven, you talk about Sudha Chandran, Helen Keller. There are lots of names, right? So it's about taking your friend, your fellow citizen with you, and also learning from him or her. Finally, one must remember that in case of persons with disability, they have a slogan called "Nothing about us without us." So, in case of planning, we must include persons who are suffering. At the same time, they are caregivers and caretakers, so that we can we can think about an inclusive society. And our dream of an inclusive education or inclusion in the general way can come true, can become true one day. In order to build an inclusive educational institution, it is indispensable to build an inclusive society, an inclusive nation state, and an inclusive economic system. Finally, there is another way where you, all of you, can help us. That is that is to become our eyes. Yes, you have got it right. To read and write for us, to become our reader, that is to say, to read for us so that we can listen and fulfill our desire of knowledge, to become our writers, scribes, or amanuenses, as they call, so that we can express our thoughts, our feelings, we can express ourselves. So, in these way, you can become our media of expression as well, my friends. We can pass exams. There are a lot of visually impaired persons like me who suffer, who really suffer to get a scribe. And often they don't. Even if they do, the scribe often is underqualified or they get it in the last moment. They don't have any time to adjust with the speed, the voice, the tone of the scribe. They are meeting the scribe first time during the exam. So no coordination is established. There's still a huge dearth of scribes. It's a humble request to all of you, and yes, all of you, to come up, please come up and help us so that we can know and express our thoughts through you, my friend. Thank you.